look all spiffy and all nice and everything, and clean us up because we're here with another HIAC wrestling podcast. Dan and Craig's continuous wrestling adventures. That's the parentheses. We're talking off air about this man here on my shirt and how we can never figure out the actual name of Against All Odds. Take a look at me now and how this parentheses. So from now on, it's HIAC wrestling podcast and in parentheses, Craig and Dan's wrestling adventure. That's an Aqua Teen Hunger Force reference. I'm Dan Law 83 on Twitter. Craig Legons is Craig Legons without a space everywhere else. And Craig, take it right away while I figure out what the hell else we're going to talk about. We're going to start the show off. We're already in the time machine. It's already black and white if you're watching on video, youtube.com/Dan83. And it's time for the wrestling historian.
Yes, Dan, we are in black and white. You are white. I am black. That's our black and white. So we will we will go back into the Wayback Machine, kids, back when titles were actually called belts, back when territories ruled the earth, back when different promotions worked together to give you, the fans, not the universe, the fans, the best wrestling on earth. So this is called the Wrestling Historian. I want to take you back to October 10th, Dan, back to that wonderful location called Grand Forks, North Dakota. Because sure, in that small town, on an AWA card, there was a tag team featuring 4 interesting individuals. The tag team of Larry the Axe Hennig, grandfather of Curtis Axel, teamed up with the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, who wasn't the American Dream yet, but teamed up with Dusty Rhodes, father of Cody and Dustin. And they lost to the tag team of Don Morocco and Lanny Kealoha. Don Morocco would, of course, go on to be Magnificent Morocco, but Lanny Kealoha would change his wrestling ring name to the one that we know now as Superfly Jimmy Snuka.
Nah, I never knew that. I just, again, and I'm not ashamed to tell you, because there's a lot of stuff I know that even you're surprised that I'm like, oh yeah, Dan knew that too. Wow, not a lot, but there, that's why you're the wrestling historian. And I'm not ashamed to admit, which is the point of doing this segment for all of you out there listening and watching on TV land or tablet land, whatever the hell you're watching right now, is you learn stuff. I just learned something new. Like the big, huge, giant Ted Turner head in about the 3rd row of the Liacouras Center in Philadelphia on AEW Dynamite, which just made me laugh. But anyway, I just learned something new. I didn't know that, man.
Yes. Don Morocco and Jimmy Snuka, who would 10 years later would go on to have one of the most famous cage matches in wrestling history in Madison Square Garden. At that same match, Bubba Ray, Tommy Dreamer, and Mick Foley were all at that card to watch Don Morocco and Jimmy Snuka. Back then, Lanny Kealoha, but they were tag team partners, and they defeated Larry the Axe Hennig and Dusty Rhodes in Grand Forks, North Dakota, October 10th, 1972. And those 4 men would have an indelible effect on professional wrestling, and Don Morocco and Jimmy Snuka most definitely would have a tremendous effect on the men we know now. It's Bubba Ray, Tommy Dreamer, and Mick Foley, who hitchhiked to see those 2 wrestle in the steel cage.
That's true.
So that's what happened. Another significant date, a significant thing happened October 10th, 1980, in the Omni in Atlanta, the finals of the tag team tournament for the Georgia Tag Team Championship. Terry Gordy and Buddy Roberts defeated the Assassins and Mr. Wrestling 1 and 2 in a round-robin tournament to become the Georgia Tag Team Champions, with a little help from Michael Hayes. With that, the fabulous Freebirds would become the Georgia Tag Team Champions. And because of the advent of cable TV and because of the far-reaching network of TBS, Turner Broadcasting System, the Freebirds would gain national exposure and would set the tone for tag team wrestling in the 80s at the time. and they would enact the Freebird Rule.
Yes.
And it came on after they won the Georgia Tag Team title October 10th, 1980. And they made the rule that went through the NWA that any two men of the three team could defend the Tag Team Championship at any time. A rule that is still in effect to this day, 39 years later. The New Day did it on all 6 of their reigns, even to an individual when Michelle McCool and Layla were the co-Divas women's champions. They enacted the Freebird Rule, so Lay Cool could be the women's champion, the Divas champion. But yeah, the Freebird Rule has taken effect for many different teams, but it started when they won the Georgia Tag Team Championship October 10th, 1980 in the Omni in Atlanta.
I just the first time, it's like I always knew it's hard to explain what I mean. Is I always knew that was a rule, but the first time I heard the expression of what it was called, which was we'd come to know later as the Freebird Rule, was when the Jersey Triad were tag team champions and WCW.
That's
one
right.
of the few bright spots in 1999, summer of 99, well, 1999 WCW period, was Jersey represent Canyon, Bam Bam Bigelow, and DDP, Diamond Dallas Page. Not only was DDP the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, two-time, he was also in a stable called the Jersey Triad, too short-lived, with Bam Bam and Canyon, obviously all three from Jersey. And it's the first time I remember the Freebird Rule. I'm sure it was mentioned before that, especially on NWA TV, but it's the first time I can remember it being the excuse, like they use it now on When the New Day is the Champion, where it's verbally go, and the Freebird Rule, so we're going to have schmuck and schmuck instead of the other schmuck. It's the tag team champions to defend the title. I always thought that was awesome. Like, that's brilliant. And, you hear the word Freebird, you know exactly what it means.
And with that title win, it put the Freebirds on the map. Now, they had been North American Tag Team Champions before in the Mid-South and had sold out the Superdome in their war with Junkyard Dog, which is what gave them the gravitas to go to Georgia and take it there. It was there when they became a national, entity and becoming the Georgia Tag Team Champions and enacting the Freebird Rule, and that's what would propel them to world class and to the greatest feud in tag team history with the Von Erichs. But it all started with them winning the Georgia Tag Team Championship. And in this particular edition of the Wrestling Historian, Dan, we're going to focus on all the three teams that I consider the most influential tag teams of all time, one of them being the Freebirds. You can catch me on a different day, I'll say the Freebirds are the most influential tag team of all time, and later on in the Historian, I'll get to two other teams that I consider the most influential tag team of all time. So there were 1A, B, and C. But the first 1A, the Freebirds, became the Georgia Tag Team Champions October 10th, 1980. Now, you mentioned 1999, Dan, the year of the Jersey Triad, and a high spot in WCW. But I'm going to focus now on a low spot in professional wrestling, because I don't know if you remember, if I don't know where you were, when the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view took place in Casino Magic Bay in St. Louis, Mississippi. The Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view, and they put together a star-studded list. They had some top-name talent, but there was, the Samoan SWAT team took on Marty Jannetty and Tommy Rogers. So you had one half of the Rockers teaming up with one half of the Fantastics. So there was that. Samoan SWAT team won that one. Greg Valentine defeated George the Animal Steele, who came to the ring with Sherry Martel, but Sherry turned her back on George and hit him in the head with a chair, and Valentine won that one. Butch and Luke, since the WWF owned the name of the Bushwhackers, I don't know why they couldn't just go back to calling them the Sheepherders. But Butch and Luke defeated the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov in a match that was probably way too long. The best match of the card, which really isn't saying a whole lot, but Tully Blanchard defeated Stan Lane. Tully Blanchard, of course, part of the Horsemen. Stan Lane, part of the Midnight Express and the Fabulous Ones. They had a 7-minute match, which was supposed to have been really good, but a great promo by Tully is what started it, and what many are now calling the highlight of the entire card was Tully Blanchard's promo. Abdul the Butcher and the one-man gang went to a double countout, and even though the Casino Magic Bay frowned upon blood, it's an Abdul the Butcher match, and Stabby Abby was in full effect, and one-man gang got several puncture wounds to his forehead with Abdul the Butcher just stabbing him, not unlike I'm doing to my... I'm just trying to show the fans what I'm trying to do with... yeah, so there is that. Jimmy Snuka defeated his old nemesis, Cowboy Bob Orton Jr., in a match that took 10 minutes, which really wasn't a minute and 45 seconds more than it should have been, with a flying body press. And it was supposed to be a match with Jake the Snake Roberts versus Jim Neidhart. It was supposed to be a singles match. And the main event was going to be King Kong Bundy versus Yokozuna. But Jake the Snake Roberts wasn't feeling himself that night. He came down to the ring with a snake and a t-shirt on, and he dropped... Yeah. Do you remember any of this, Dan?
You want to talk about 21? I got 22.
Well, Jake was... again, not feeling himself. He came down to the ring with a snake in the bag, wearing a t-shirt, and then left and went back up the ramp and came back and without the t-shirt, trying to get the fans to chant. He grabbed a woman's hand and rubbed his nipples with the woman's hand, and then proceeded to have a match with Jim Neidhart. And that went nowhere fast. And Jake went for the snake in the bag early and was pretending the snake was his genitals. At that point, King Kong Bundy showed up, and an audible was called either by him or by Jim Neidhart, and they were talking to each other. And they tried to have some semblance of a match, and they started double teaming Jake. And out comes Yokozuna. And the announcer announced that it was a tag team match. And now while this was happening, when Neidhart and Jake were in the ring, Jake would leave, would go to the crowd, and was still trying to get them to chant something, and still making the snake into his genitals, and they would cut away from him and like focus on his boots or take shots of the crowd. And at one point, Neidhart was hitting Jake. First he was trying to bite Jake biting Jake on the forehead to try to get some oomph back, and then Jake started laughing as he was getting bitten by Jim Neidhart. And then Jim, I guess frustrated, hit Jake with a couple chair shots, even hitting him with 2 chairs at once. Finally, Bundy came down and really waffled Jake with a chair really hard on the head. And then it started double teaming Yokozuna. The whole thing was a cluster F. The referee counted really fast when Bundy hit Jake with a splash, even though he wasn't the legal man. And they got out of there. And yeah.
No comment. Nope.
But that was the old Jake Roberts. But you know what? After that match, a lot of people didn't think he was going to be around much longer. But here we are 20 years later, and Jake the Snake Roberts, Hall of Famer, still with us. And needless to say, the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view was the first, last, and only one of its kind. So the good people of St. Louis, Mississippi will have that to hang their hats on.
Louis, Mississippi. Sure. Why not?
We're going to go to next day, October 11th, 1984. In your backyard in the Baltimore Civic Center, Dan, there was an AWA and NWA combined card.
Horrible arena.
Yeah, but they had amazing talent in this one card.
Yeah.
The AWA, NWA, and Georgia superstars combined for one card. The AWA Tag Team Champions, the Road Warriors, went to a double disqualification with the unlikely team of Dusty Rhodes and Ole Anderson. Now, this was right during the Horseman territory, so Dusty and Ole still were a tag team. Ronnie Garvin defeated Ted DiBiase for the National Heavyweight Championship, and the NWA champion Ric Flair defeated Harley Race in a steel cage match. And all that took place in Baltimore, when the NWA and AWA would combine to do shows to kind of offset the runaway train at this point, which was the WWF, and Hulkamania was running wild. So the AWA and NWA cards would pop up from time to time, and this one happened in Baltimore, of all places, because Baltimore was not an AWA stronghold at all. But with the Road Warriors being the AWA Tag Team Champions and still very much wrestling in the NWA, they thought to capitalize on the Road Warriors' success in Baltimore. That was October 11th, 1984. October 12th, 1972, in Amarillo, Texas, Mr. Wrestling Tim Woods went up against the Red Devil in a loser must unmask match. And in 16 minutes and 55 seconds, Mr. Wrestling, Tim Woods, would win the bout with an abdominal stretch. So the Red Devil had to unmask, and the Red Devil turned out to be Dick Beyer, who would just put on another mask, a white one this time, and would go on to be the Destroyer. Maybe the most, definitely, arguably the most popular masked wrestler in the history of Japan, undoubtedly the most popular American masked wrestler in the history of Japan, and will go on to have a distinguished career. But Dick Beyer would make a career out of wrestling in mask. He had been Dr. X in the AWA, in fact, was the first masked world heavyweight champion in the AWA. And when he wrestled in the Indies, he was the Red Devil. But after losing his mask to Mr. Wrestling, he would trade his red mask in for a white one, and the Destroyer was born. And Dick Beyer, as the Destroyer, would win championship after championship in indie promotions in the WWA and in Japan. The sensational, intelligent Destroyer would be a legend, but he had to lose his Red Devil identity first and become the Destroyer. Remember I told you about combined cards? Well, October 12th, 1985, the AWA, the NWA, and the Stars of Memphis would all converge in Nashville for a massive card there. Superstar Billy Graham, the end is when he was in the NWA, would defeat Starship Eagle, who we now know as Dangerous Dan Spivey. Jimmy Valiant and Manny Fernandez would defeat the Midnight Express, Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton. The Fabulous Ones, my other favorite of the most influential tag teams of all time, would defeat the Sheepherders, Butch and Luke, who we heard from earlier. The NWA Tag Team Champions, the Rock and Roll Express, would defeat Ivan and Nikita Koloff by disqualification. And the AWA Heavyweight Champion Rick Martel would defeat Jerry the King Lawler. Now, Jerry Lawler would always fight the AWA champion. When the AWA champion would come to Tennessee, Jerry Lawler would always get a crack, but this would be the only time he would wrestle the AWA champion as Rick Martel. He had wrestled Nick Bockwinkel many times. Kurt Hennig, obviously, he would win the AWA title, but he only wrestled Rick Martel for the AWA championship once, and this was it, October 12th. In Nashville, Tennessee. But you had the AWA champion and three of the greatest tag teams of all time, the NWA Tag Team Champion, the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express, and the Fabulous Ones, all on the same card. The Fabulous Ones, my other most influential tag team of all time. The Rock and Roll Express were a copy of the Fabulous Ones. Um, and the Midnight Express was created to combat the Rock and Roll Express. So the Fabulous Ones influenced two of the greatest tag teams of all time. Not to mention the Rockers, the Rock and Roll RPMs, the Fantastics, the Motor City Machine Guns, the Hardys, Strike Force. If not for the Fabulous Ones, none of those teams would even exist. Good-looking babyface tag team, come out to rock and roll music. Jerry Lawler's idea. Jackie Fargo endorsed it. The Fabulous Ones were responsible for more copycat tag teams that will become main event tag teams than any team in history. And they were all on the same card. That same day, October 12th, 1992, in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, of all places. We've gone in this segment, Dan, when we've gone from Grand Forks, North Dakota, to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. We've crisscrossed the globe, but on this particular day, Bret Hart would defeat the Nature Boy Ric Flair for his first World Championship, winning the WWF Heavyweight title in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. A title change that came out of nowhere because Ric Flair had just defeated Randy Savage 6 weeks earlier for the title. And this was not, there were cameras there, but it was not televised live, and it wasn't televised to tape later on. The full match wasn't seen in its entirety until the WWF released it on DVD or videotape at the time. But Bret Hart, October 12th, Bret Hart would win his first world championship by defeating Ric Flair with his parents in the audience. And this would be Flair's first submission loss in the WWF. And it happened October 12th, 1992. And the legacy of Bret Hart, the legend of Bret Hart, started right there.
Wow. I'll never forget when Bret first came to the WCW, and they start after the referee debacle at Starrcade, which we've baked to death on this podcast. But then Flair and Hart started feuding to lead into Sold Out '98, and I remember being excited, and I remember, I just still remember that as being a highlight after like I said, the debacle Starrcade was, and you couldn't go wrong with those two. Just wanted to add a little into that on the end.
Yeah, that's true, and they could never go wrong. But it's another example of two guys not really liking each other. Not really. Bret has never had a whole lot of good things to say about Nature Boy. In fact, said he was intimidated before the match because of the reputation, the legend of Ric Flair, but he just didn't think Flair was all that when he wrestled him. And they've never really gotten along, but they, like you said, they've always had great matches. I guess it's the common denominator. Bret and Shawn never got along, but they also had great matches too. And I found it ironic when Bret said that about Rick, not thinking he was all that. Ric Flair said something similar about Bruno Sammartino. It's like I never got it. I know he was the legend and all that, but yeah, just didn't. I never saw it. But so there you go. Everyone's got an opinion. It's the Martin Scorsese Marvel movie thing all over again. Hey, that's what you think. That's fine. Don't agree with it, but hey, that's you. You do you. We're going to go to October 13th, 1975. Historic match between Bruno Sammartino and Ivan Koloff. Now, I didn't know this, but when this match took place October 13th, 1975 in Madison Square Garden, this will be the first match between those two since Ivan Koloff defeated Bruno for the WWF title, and still regarded as the biggest upset in WWF history. Ivan Koloff still the only man to defeat Bruno Sammartino in Madison Square Garden, the only man to pin Bruno Sammartino ever. But this will be their first match since in 4 years. First match in Madison Square Garden since Ivan defeated Bruno. They would go 20 minutes, and the match would be stopped because both men were bleeding too much. This would be the first of 3 straight matches between these two, Bruno and Ivan, in Madison Square Garden, which will culminate in the first ever steel cage match in Madison Square Garden history. And it started October 13th, 1975. Bruno Sammartino and Ivan Koloff, who's still not in the Hall of Fame.
Oh,
but yeah,
never mind.
No. That's the whole. It's an HNP, whole nother podcast.
Mind-boggling.
But on this date, also, that was historic. But it was a rough day for tag teams. October 13th, 1981. Mr. Fuji and Mr. Saito defeated Bubba Ray Dudley's favorite tag team, Tony Gurria and Rick Martel, for the WWF Tag Team Championship.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, when he was growing up, he always loved tag teams.
Yeah.
So his favorite tag team was Tony Gurria, Rick Martel.
Wow.
You know, and the Samoans, Fuji and Saito, and the Briscoes. It was he was a big NW, but Tony Gurria and Rick Martel were the first tag team that he loved, and it was Fuji and Saito would win the tag team championship in a great way, and the way the camera got it perfectly. Rick Martel went to a flying body press on Mr. Saito, and at the same time he came off the ropes. Mr. Fuji threw a huge handful of salt right into his face, and the way we saw it, and Vince McMahon, the announcer, let's see this in slow motion, and look at the amount of salt right in the face of Rick Martel. It's no, and they just freeze it right there, and you could not even see Rick Martel's face because it was completely blind. It was completely covered in salt, thrown expertly, perfectly by Mr. Fuji. So in 1981, Mr. Fuji and Mr. Saito would defeat Tony Gurria and Rick Martel for the WWF Tag Team Championship.
On the risk of asking a very dumb question to which I probably already know the answer, but this is why I'm asking you because you are the historian. I know Rick Martel won a tag team championship with Steamboat. Did he win with Gurria?
Rick Martel never won a tag team title.
Steamboat. Oh, who am I thinking of? No, brain fart. Did he win with Tony Gurria?
He won with Tony Gurria, and he won with Tito Santana.
Tito Santana. Oh God, I'm racist. That's not what I meant. Sorry. I was seeing Steamboat in my head. S name Santana, the mortal enemy of Coach Gator in DC, in the DC Nova Pro area.
Gotcha.
Yes, I was seeing an S in my head, and so yes, thank you. Okay, so he's tag team with both. Great. I'll shut up now.
Yeah, but ironically enough, Dan, Tito Santana and Ricky Steamboat were both known as Richard Blood during their careers. So.
Sure,
there's that.
I'm going to say that's the connection, so I don't sound like a complete a-hole.
Yeah. But yeah, Rick Martel's first WWF tag team title partner was Tony Gurria, and later on with Tito Santana as Strikeforce, they would be WWF tag team champions.
You gave me when I said the wrong name, and I know you knew who I meant, but you were like, he was never tag team partner with Steamboat, you idiot.
I didn't say that. Amber was thinking it, but I didn't say it.
Yeah, she's like idiot.
But that was 1981. 1985, the day after facing the Rock and Roll Express in Memphis, Ivan and Nikita Koloff would defeat the Rock and Roll Express for the NWA Tag Team Championship, October 13th, 1985. That same day, October 13th, 1992, Ted DiBiase and Mike Rotundo, Money Inc., would defeat the Natural Disasters in Regina, Saskatchewan, the day after Saskatoon in Saskatchewan, that Bret Hart would defeat Ric Flair. The very next day in Regina, Saskatchewan, that wrestling hotbed of Saskatchewan, Money Inc. would defeat the Natural Disasters for the WWF Tag Team Championship.
This is when I get to be the other nerd because of Canada and hockey. It's Regina.
Oh, Regina. Okay.
Yes, rhymes with vagina.
Got it.
Okay.
Well, two world championships changed hands 2 days in a row in
Crazy.
Saskatchewan. In Saskatoon, October 12th and October 13th in Regina.
The
So
hotbed of Saskatchewan.
Yeah, the wrestling capital of the North, Saskatchewan. And if that weren't enough, and by God, don't you think it ought to be, that same date, October 13th, 1997, the Steiners would defeat Scott Hall and Six for the substituting for the injured Kevin Nash for the WCW Tag Team Championship. So October 13th was, if you were a tag team on October 13th, chances are you were losing your belt.
Get the F out.
Yeah. October 14th was a sad day. We lost Captain Lou Albano. October 14th.
He's my Super Mario.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to say, whenever I hear the song, all I can hear is Captain Lou going, I can't, I'll probably get a copyright strike. Swing your arms from side to side. Come on, it's time to go to the Mario. That's all I can see.
And that's fine. And I always marveled at that, Dan, because when we lost Captain Lou, so many younger people were saying, do the Mario. I'm sorry, he's gone to Mario, because they only knew him as Super Mario, which is amazing because I've never hated a manager more than Lou Albano growing up, because he was such a great heel, but he was just physically disgusting. He would come to the ring in a short sleeve shirt that would always be unbuttoned, huge gut, the cigar, the mustache, the beard, the hitting of, and every week he have a different, and not every week, but he would have a different tag team. Whoever tag team he would lose the title, he would be back the next week with a different tag team. He's managed more tag team champions than any manager in WWF history. The Executioners, the Blackjacks, the Samoans, the Lumberjacks. They were all Mr. Fuji, Mr. Saito, who I mentioned earlier, all Captain Lou Albano prodigies, all Captain Lou Albano tag teams, all won their championships because of Lou Albano. Whether him getting in the ring or using his cigar, and the fans would just go absolutely nuts. I'd be jumping up and down when any wrestler would get a hold of Lou Albano, especially when Andre got a hold of him, because Lou Albano would sell like nobody's business. The match between after the Jimmy Snuka Ray Stevens angle, where Snuka was pile drived after we found out that Captain Lou Albano had been ripping Jimmy Snuka off, and the late great Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, the original Nature Boy, stepped in on behalf of Jimmy Snuka, turned Jimmy Snuka face. The first match back that Jimmy Snuka had after that pile driver angle with Ray Stevens was right here in Philadelphia, November 17th, 1982. I'm already giving you plugging a future wrestling historian. That was the first match back between Jimmy Snuka and Ray Stevens. Jimmy Snuka would team up with Buddy Rogers. Ray Stevens would team up with Lou Albano. The crowd, when Jimmy finally got his hands on Lou Albano, was deafening, and that would turn out to be the very last match in the career of Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. But they were all there to see Jimmy Snuka get their hands on Lou Albano. He gave so many great, and when I met him, I think I'll send you the picture if you want to put this on our YouTube channel. If Harry can edit it in. When I finally met Lou Albano at a wrestling fan fest, that's what they were calling it then. He was telling me about his diet and how he would eat, and how the doctors told him, "You're going to die." The amount of vodka and cigars and food that he ate on a daily basis, and the travel back then being insane, and that was in the 70s. He happened to be part of also the Rock and Wrestling connection with Cyndi Lauper. He was right there in the middle of that. So when wrestling did have its resurgence, he got a whole different set of audience members because people knew him as Cyndi Lauper's manager. And then when Roddy Piper turned on him and he became this, again, the face, and he had a whole second career being in the Rock and Wrestling connection and being this cartoon character with rubber bands in his face and everything, and having his own doll, and so many great things I could say about Captain Lou, who but we lost him October 14th, and he'll never be forgotten. Great man. Which brings us to today in wrestling history. 1976, I just started becoming a wrestling fan, a hardcore fan, but thanks to the After magazines, I got to read about wrestlers that I've never seen or even heard of, but I became invested in their careers because of the pictures that told such a great story. And on this particular day in Charlotte, all three Mid-Atlantic Championships changed hands, and they were all captured in the Wrestler magazine. And I got to see them all in black and white, but I was enthralled. Tim Woods defeated Angelo Mosca for the Mid-Atlantic TV Championship. Ric Flair would defeat Wahoo McDaniel for the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship, and Paul Jones would defeat Blackjack Mulligan for the United States title. Blackjack Mulligan, I'd known because he was one half of the Blackjacks, and they were former WWF Tag Team Champions, managed by Captain Lou Albano. So I knew how huge Blackjack Mulligan was. I knew how tough he was. Blackjack Mulligan, the grandfather of the Fiend, Bray Wyatt. But he would lose his United States Championship to Paul Jones, and that just legitimized Blackjack Mulligan as being the best of the Blackjack. And that way I knew how tough Paul Jones was because he defeated Blackjack Mulligan. But all took place today in 1976. 1987, the Sheepherders, again, Butch and Luke, not the Bushwhackers. Here they are again. They would defeat the Lightning Express, Brad Armstrong and Tim Horner, for the UWF Tag Team Championship. What we didn't know then, that the Sheepherders, Butch and Luke, would leave to go to the WWF. The UWF would fold, so Butch and Luke would be the very last UWF Tag Team Champions. UWF would get absorbed by the NWA, and like I said, Butch and Luke would sell their souls and would go to the WWF to be cartoon characters. And the most violent tag team in all of wrestling at the time would no longer exist. That's the same day, 1988, October 16th today, in Providence, Rhode Island. What we didn't know, Dan, as much as it's televised now, but every year there would be a King of the Ring tournament in Hartford, Connecticut, that would take place on a house show, and there would be different winners every year, and they didn't start televising it till later. But 1988, Ted DiBiase would defeat Randy Savage in the finals to win the King of the Ring. Now, Ted DiBiase has never been officially called a King of the Ring, but he would defeat Randy Savage for the King of the Ring tournament. And Randy Savage at the time was the WWF Heavyweight Champion. So this would be the only time Ted DiBiase would ever pin Randy Savage. And it took place at the King of the Ring tournament that was held every year in Connecticut. And he would win King of the Ring. That same day, today in wrestling history, 1997, at the Elks Lodge, the unofficial Madhouse of Extreme, Bam Bam Bigelow, you remember him earlier from the Jersey Triad? He would defeat Shane Douglas for the ECW Heavyweight Championship with a little help from Rick Rude, who, upon returning to wrestling and debuting in ECW, would make his mission to F with the franchise. Now, he had already teamed with Shane Douglas, and Rude would be managing Shane, But he would present his challenger for the ECW heavyweight title, and it would be his partner, Bam Bam Bigelow. Bam Bam, Shane, listen, Chris Candido were the new triple threat. Bam Bam came out, attacked Chris Candido, and then would come into the ring and would defeat Shane Douglas for the ECW heavyweight title and have his hand raised by Rick Rude, thus fulfilling Rude's promise to F with the franchise. And on this day, I want to say 2012, 11, in TNA, Hulk Hogan would wrestle Sting in what would be, for now, the last match in the career of Hulk Hogan. I'm trying to think if he wrestled in WWF in an actual match.
No,
He
did not.
Then this would be today. Would be his last match, the last time Hulk Hogan wrestled.
Impact?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well. Yeah, it's amazing. Oh, sorry, your end cap.
Yeah, and that, my friends, has been the wrestling historian.
It's amazing to me that they kept going back to that Hogan Sting well when it just worked out so well the first time when certain people don't want to do the job. Hulk Hogan, Sting, nice guy. Sting don't care. It's fast 3 count. That wasn't fast. Blah blah blah.
F Nick Patrick. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, man. If he only just did just a little bit faster, it would have been fine. Just a little bit. Thanks, Nick. Did you as we do this? See, we've been doing this on Wednesday night since 2012, and unfortunately, Wednesday nights have kind of changed. I don't know if anybody listening knows this. There's some wrestling happening right now, so I got NXT and AEW playing side by side on picture in picture for view. You're switching back and forth, and AEW's been great. The Dr. Britt Baker match was fantastic. Right now, the tag team is Pac and Moxley and
Kenny Olivia.
Kenny Olivia. No, stop it! It's Kenny Omega, and you stop that right now. And Adam Page. But on the other side, we just had Diamond Dijak. I'm not calling him whatever they're calling him. And it's not that I hate name changes because I think that's the word. I can't believe he changed his name. I don't care. Well, unless you change their name and they become a joke when they were like the most destructive tag team in the world, like the Sheepherders versus the Bushwhackers. That's a gimmick change. That's not just a name change. It's a gimmick change.
Or you go from Terry Taylor to a Red Rooster.
Well, from what I know about Terry Taylor, I don't care if he became the Brown Rooster and just got crapped on in the middle of the ring. Go to hell. The TNA thing, the Divas thing, I think very, very less of Terry Taylor these days than I used to. And it's a shame because he was a good worker. Everything that they say worker-wise about Terry Taylor, I think the Red Rooster, and I have an ADD dad. I know exactly where I'm going with this. They compare it to the Dusty Rhodes thing. He made the plumber's son thing work because he's the American goddamn dream. Terry Taylor was a hell of a worker, and if he just had that little bit extra, he would have made that work too. You can make a dumb gimmick work.
Exactly, and that's the strength of Terry Taylor. Terry Taylor was originally supposed to be Mr. Perfect.
Mr. Perfect. It was from Mr. Perfect to the Red Rooster. So who did you piss off, Terry? I can only imagine. Knowing what we know now, could only imagine who you pissed off. But talking about Keith Lee and Donovan Dijak, we just watched a very big man, and I mean that unironically and non-sarcastic. Keith Lee is a big dude. Just do a reverse hurricanrana on Donovan Dijak, who's not small, and nail it, and had one of the matches of the week so far. Keith Lee deserves all the good things. I was telling Craig off air this story, and I tell it now because the company's not there anymore. It doesn't matter. Keith Lee wrestled Angela Slane, another person that you'll never get to see because her career was cut short due to injury, but she's one of the best wrestlers out there. I'm just going to put a gender on it. She was awesome. Just Lane, Keith Lee for Nova Pro. You can find that match. It's not what you expect. It's a really good match. It says something about both of them as workers, but Keith Lee, Nova Pro, supposed to get to the show, and it's getting to, showtime, and I'm getting ready to leave the house, and I get a text. Hey, nobody's picked up Keith. Can you pick him up? Sure. Okay. About halfway there, it starts pouring. And when I say pouring, I mean like visibility for a half-mile pouring. Like can't see crap near Reagan National in D.C., like great roads in the first place, that sort of thing. And I felt so bad because I pull up, I get out of the car, open the windows, like, quick, get your bags in here. He goes, and he's very, don't make no mistake, nice son of a bitch. He had not a rude thing to say, not an attitude, but he did go, why are you just getting here now? I'm like, they just told me to leave. He's like, okay. And the weather was so bad. It's so funny because I'm nervous. I'm a very good driver. Everybody tells me I'm an excellent driver. Dean's told me I'd rather drive with you than almost anybody else to anywhere. Don't care. You're just good at it. So it's pouring. I'm in my SUV just doing this because I'm like, don't kill this person. Please don't kill people. It's pouring. We're hydroplaning, all that fun stuff. I look back and I'm making noise and talking as I'm, avoiding traffic. And I look in my rear view, that dude's sleeping. He's out like a light. We get to the show. He starts I almost felt like I was a manager for a rock star because there were people outside. Wasn't that many people. It's a little indie wrestling show, but I was like, hey, wait till we get to the show. He was very nice. He stopped for one person. I was like, hey, come on in. We'll get you. You can get his stuff later. Leave him alone now. Let's go. And go through the day, and about halfway through cleaning up after the show, he finds me and he's like, hey, what's going on? And all of a sudden he got through all that crap. It was just so funny to see a guy who was stressed out as I was to get to the damn arena. On top of the arena, it was a fire hall. It's the second time I did that. That wasn't even rehearsed. I did that when we were off air. Get to the show, and after it finally was over, he's like, he was just so cool. And I remember going, I thought you hated me. There's this fat guy who won't shut up driving you in a car. He goes, no, I was tired. It was just the worst timing ever. But I just remember looking back and seeing this big guy just out. It was so funny to me. You had to be there, I guess. I don't know.
I felt like I was there, Dan.
Huh?
I felt like I was there, Dan.
Thanks a lot, Craig. I love it when I tell stories. So here's another story for you this week. Yes. I'll say this. NWA Power was my favorite show this week again for the second week in a row. And I'm not trying to look at it as and you know me, Craig, as much as I like old, the history of wrestling and watching old stuff. I'm not one of these old school wrestling was better in that way. We can argue about the numbers in the crowd and the money that was made, which are fact. But I'm one that thinks and I'm sure I'll get heat for this, that the in-ring product is miles away from what it used to be. Just is. Not all of it, but a lot of it. Yeah. The further you go back, the more it is that today it's probably better, arguably, than it ever was.
I agree.
I appreciate it coming from you. I appreciate that I'm not talking out of my ass so much.
No.
But maybe it's because it's only an hour. Maybe it's because there's less commercials because it's on YouTube. Maybe it is because of the old school format. And I've liked, honestly, my NWA, NXT, AEW tied Raw and SmackDown below that because that's all I've had the time to try to watch. Wow, I have to get back on Women's of Wrestling Season 2 because that was a lot of fun and also condensed within an hour. It was quick. I think I'm just getting too old for 2-3 hours a night. I'll be doing something else. But being able to put on Power and just, it's over. And I want to oversell this man. Aaron Stevens, formerly known as Idol Stevens, formerly known
known as
Go ahead, Craig.
Damien Sandow.
Yes, and also formerly known as Damien Mizdow, which arguably was when he was more over than everybody else in that company, just by mocking the Miz. Made his return.
Former Money in the Bank winner.
I even forget that part. My God. He's back in wrestling, and he decided NWA was going to be where he was going to make his mark. And I will say that interview, that it was just an interview segment, but that little interview segment was the highlight of the day of that episode, and a very good episode. The main event was fantastic. It's just solid right now. And I guess you could do that when you film it in like a weekend and you bang them all out and you have continuity right there trying to, and I'm not knocking the other shows. I'm not here to do that. The Twitter's very much knocking and insulting and critiquing in that way. I'm not here to do that. I just happen to think the last 2 weeks for me, NWA Power is the highlight. And it was, I don't care how that episode ended. Aaron Stevens being there, it was going to be the highlight anyway. I'm that much of a mark for him. I don't care how that sounds. But that little segment where he asked David Marquez to not look him in the eye and ask his next question. And then David looked him in the eye, and the guy in the crowd said, "Don't look at him." It's free, people. Please, I beg of you, if you're listening to my voice, if you haven't, don't start with episode 1. Go right to episode 2 called Clickbait, NWA Power. Watch it. It's barely an hour. It's 56 minutes. It's less than that. It's 51 minutes because the first 4 minutes of that video on YouTube is a countdown to the show start. Go watch the show. Craig, overall, your favorite show this week in wrestling?
It's weird, Dan. I was so excited for NWA, and I'm still excited for just seeing that old studio being brought back to life. And yes, the wrestling now is light years. I would say different than it was
different. That's
30,
a better
40 years ago. Yeah. Because 34 years ago, as growing up in Philly, when I got to see anything for Mid-Atlantic, when I got to see any NWA shows, I consider that the greatest thing ever. So when I'm watching a Jack Briscoe versus a Rick Harris match, Rick Harris would go on to be Black Bart, but again, to watch that match, it was exciting because I got to see Jack Briscoe, or I got to see Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat demolish a couple of jobbers, and just do it all in the ring with rest holds and insane arm drags and chops from the top rope. That's what made it exciting then. But you look at it now, you look at a show in that same studio 40 years ago, you see a lot of rest holds, you see a lot of arm drags, you see a lot of headlocks, and you see a crowd still going crazy. You see a crowd very loud and very into it. Now, a dive to the outside is the new arm drag now.
You were, and I don't mean this in an insulting way. You're elaborating on the point Jim Cornette was making last week on the podcast. It's a very good point. We're not going to debate whether we like Jim on this show. It's as far as a wrestling mind, there's very few other than Craig Legans who should have that job that's as knowledgeable as Jim Cornette is. I just said that. I put that out there. So no pressure, Craig. You're very true. It's a very good point, and it's just factual. Like a flip is the I don't think it was even, that might have been Brian Last that made that point. Now that I'm remembering, Craig, I can't remember now. But yes, continue, please. Damian Priest is on NXT right now. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So NWA was my favorite show to watch, if only because of the aesthetics. AEW had a great ending with the Rhodes Clan being assaulted, and the Inner Circle being the new dominant group in AEW. Really thought They were going to pull the trigger on MJF turning on the roads, but I'm glad they held it off. But that was probably the thing that the image that captured me the most. We talked about it before we went on the air. The draft. This was the big draft this week. Started on SmackDown and ended on Raw. They've done it. They've done the draft. It used to be a yearly thing, but this is more of a network thing between the USA and Fox, or consolidating their assets, finding out which works best where. We're getting this way, and the couples get to stay together, Becky and Seth, and then what a surprise, Andrade gets to go on Raw with his round of applause for them. Get to stay, and he and Charlotte Flair get to stay together. Get some more, but with anything with the draft, it's how it will shake out, and if these are the best moves, now that Fox is involved, this is the best possible thing for both brands. Would a Brock Lesnar on Fox mean bigger ratings? Obviously, a bigger name, and that's no disrespect to Kofi Kingston, how he the amount of support he gets at house shows and how over and popular he still is. But do you want to go into Fox with Kofi as your champion or Brock Lesnar as your champion?
Right,
if you want to, if you want to attract new viewers, if you want to get the most bang for your buck, that would be Brock. As long as Revival are still the tag team champions, even though they're completely invisible the last 2 weeks, I'm fine with that. But yeah, I would say AEW, NXT, and SmackDown and Raw were my favorite shows this week.
I'll tell you what,
that
last segment on Dynamite with the tag team match we were talking about earlier, where Moxley, first of all, Moxley being back in Philly and that as Moxley and not as Dean Ambrose, that was a huge moment. You could feel that off the television. Well, mostly because I think my television is about to blow up. That's probably bad. So stupid. God, I'm so corny. But you had Moxley trying to bring in the implements and Pac going, no, don't do that. And Moxley just doing the dirty deed, whatever they call it now. I don't remember. To Pac and leaving Pac to die with Kenny Omega. Thanks. You got me doing it now. And my God, why can't I remember Adam Page's freaking name? Adam Page. That's good stuff. We'll see how NXT goes. But to elaborate on what you said, as far as ratings and changes, there's always been a major change as far as SmackDown goes. Eric Bischoff, after 13 weeks of being back in the WWE, has been fired. Gone. According to insiders, this is not a shock. And the words that were used were, where is this? That certain promises the bands that were asked of were not being upheld. I mean, I don't know how you, after 13 weeks you can do that, but okay, sure. You know,
were you surprised?
And very surprised. I don't think it was long enough. You know, it's very interesting because last week everybody was making this big deal about the SmackDown ratings being down, but then when the ratings report came out, everybody's ratings were down across the board.
The new fall TV season has started, so network shows are returning shows, brand new shows.
Baseball.
Are getting, baseball playoffs are back. Hockey has started. I don't know if anyone realizes that also. And besides network shows, there's a whole lot of other streaming services that are taking away fans away from television. So, yes, ratings are down all across the board. I myself had 9 shows to watch at the same time at 9 o'clock. So if there was a wrestling show on there, they could have brought back Andre the Giant versus Baba Giant, and I would have missed it because everything that was on at 9 o'clock I wanted to see and I had to see. So if there was anything on wrestling related, I'm going to miss it on Tuesday nights at 9.
I will say this: if those two came back because of obvious reasons, that would probably be watched live because would have some questions.
As would I.
Oh God, Britt Baker returns to Pittsburgh. Stop it. Anyway, I am surprised, but the ratings thing is what was dropped as my voice cracks because I'm 12. Social media has been so focused on the number of ratings for so long, ignoring merchandise sales, ignoring stock when it comes to the WWE, ignoring the stock market. Listen, if the stock market's going to stay kind of where it is, nobody's going to do anything. The only thing you're going to see is how to make money, like the shows in Saudi Arabia, like the SmackDown deal on Fox was all about getting money in. We not here to argue the merits of the evil and good for that. It's a wrestling company. I can assure you, after having the conversations about certain people who have done terrible, terrible things, still getting booked at the ECW arena to this day, that we could probably talk about every single solitary company, active and defunct, that have booked and done terrible, terrible, terrible things to either stay afloat or to just draw a crowd, or people who are afraid of their spots who wouldn't say anything because of that spot. It is the cycle of wrestling or business in general. Please don't, let's not go there. I get it in that way. But everybody was focusing on the SmackDown numbers because it's such a high number, because they get so much more. So when it dips, you can see the number dip higher. But everybody was down this week. And that was the point I was making before the final rating report came out. Everybody's like, WWE's down. I'm like, watch, everybody's going to be down. Well, what do you know? Looks like everything was down again. This is gonna be a long, slow burn, because sure, you have NXT, and I will maintain, again, arguing that NXT might have the better in-ring product in the WWE. It's still treated as developmental, and you have one company, AEW, who wants to be an alternative or the best. They say an alternative. They want to be the best. Any company that's going against WWE, if they're not trying to be the best, you're out of your mind. And I mean that in a positive, like that's the way it's supposed to be. People were going to look at NXT as a developmental system until someone says otherwise. So there's no real changes that are going to be made. Maybe towards the end of the year, Royal Rumble season. Now that everybody's cooking, I really feel everything's going to get high, and you can rebuttal on what I'm about to say if I'm out of my mind or not. I'm guessing here, folks. This is not the wrestling guru saying this is the way. I'm not Dave Meltzer, where I'm just going to throw it out there and pray that it's true. Pre-1996. So, with everybody running now, NWA, AEW, WOW, New Japan, WWE, everybody's on TV right now. Until you're going against one of the big shows, that's when you're going to see people kicking it into high gear. When Royal Rumble comes up, when WrestleMania season comes up and everybody's on TV, that's when it's going to start getting interesting. When WCW Nitro, and I hate to go back to the well, I'm just using the last time we had a war. No, I'm not counting Impact on Monday night. That was a joke. It took a good 7-8 months before finally something happened where it was like, oh, what's that over there? So it's going to be a little while. Still, with all the options, in this discussion, we just gave you examples of, well, this week you liked this, and this, Dan liked the other thing. But how long do you think it's going to be before somebody gets their ass in gear? Especially after Bischoff getting fired so quick. By the way, the end of that story is Bruce Pritchard was put in his place. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Ken, since we we didn't really wait, like you said, all this upheaval and transition takes time for it to settle in. Do you think Bruce Pritchard can do something that Eric Bischoff couldn't, or uh, is this a point? Is this a thing of well, Eric was in a no-win situation, or is this more suited for Bruce's style or his temperament? He's been with the company longer. He knows, the ins and outs and everyone there. I got when I heard the news, Dan. It's still gotten that my first reaction, my first instinct. Of course, it didn't work. Bischoff's a WCW guy. Pritchard's a WWF guy. That's why, and it's incredibly outdated, and they're all on the same page. There's only one company now, but yeah, 13 weeks. It's I was shocked.
Bischoff was going to be damned if you do, damned if you don't, really, unless there was I don't know what people are expecting. Are they expecting Monday Night War numbers? Are they expecting 4, 5s, and 6s?
Yeah, one of the stories I left out of the Wrestling Historian because this week in pro wrestling history, one of the Saturday Night Main Event shows aired this week. I believe it was aired in 1990, 29 years ago. This week, I think they're gearing up for Survivor Series. The Road Warriors and the Ultimate Warrior went up against Demolition, Axe, Smash, and Crush. And I believe Hogan went up against Ted DiBiase with Zeus in the corner.
Ow.
I think Roddy Piper went up against who was it? Yeah, I left it out, but it did it. It aired this week in wrestling history, and it did a 9 share.
Yeah, we're never hitting those numbers.
Yeah. And I'm not, unless something big happened, I'm intentionally leaving out the Monday Night Wars every week on the Wrestling Historian because either you're there or you're not. And again, unless something big happened during those, I'm not going to recap the Monday Night Wars or on this date, this guy wrestled this guy and WCW did this, unless something big happened. But the ratings then. Because I would only report on the ratings, who beat who in this particular time, because this was during the 84-week run of WCW dominating the WWE. But the numbers then were obviously a lot higher than they are right now. So I'm intentionally leaving that out. But yeah, a 9 for Saturday Night's Main Event in 1990, and that was considered low for Saturday Night's Main Event.
I mean, we just talk about world class.
Yeah.
And it's their little world where they're doing 11s and 12s on a Christian network.
Or we could talk about Memphis in Tennessee, where WMC TV would have more people watching its tiny station than any place, than any market in all of North America.
I don't think people factor in the actual astronomical, when compared today, numbers that were involved in the heyday of wrestling. And that's what people get mad. And not just Jim Cornette, any old school guy. That's why people get mad. It's like wrestling's not as big as it used to be. Well, of course it is. No, you're looking at quantity, not quality, and not numbers. It was just factually bigger. Monetarily and ratings, it just was bigger. Now, if anything, anybody knows about wrestling and its history, you, myself, this happens all the time, and eventually there will be another golden age. I don't know if we're seeing the beginning or the end of it. Like, is this finally the end of that mid-90s golden age, and then it's going to take a rise, or is this the beginning of the rise again? It's a cycle that happens all the time, guys. It's fun to screw around on social media, but some people that are just like, and Harry was doing it to break my chops, and he's kind of serious, but he doesn't really care. But some people are using that ratings thing as just look how bad it is. I'm like, yeah, look how bad it is for everybody.
Yeah.
So we'll see. As long as the money's coming in, though, that's where the answer will lie.
Yes.
with that being said, I did not expect that real serious discussion to come out, so I think we're going to call it there before I say something dumb again. Craig, what do you got coming up this week? Where can people follow you, sir?
Well, the people can follow me if they like on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter at Craig Ligons, CraigLiggeons. If you like that comic book stuff, I host another podcast called Comic Book Gurus. We'll be talking about still some Joker fallout. They've announced a new Catwoman and some of the premieres of these shows that are on these comic book shows that have all returned this week, and which is taking a big chunk of the ratings out of the wrestling that we both love. But Batwoman, Supergirl, Arrow, Flash, Black Lightning are all back on TV this week, so we'll be discussing that on Comic Book Gurus, and probably something else comic book related that's got lots to do with geeks.
It's a lovely time. Follow me on Twitter at DanLaw83, the HIAC Talk Radio Network, which is Stadium Journey, Obey the Puck, and this wrestling podcast is at all social media platforms and websites, HIAC Talk Radio. Listen to our complete archive at thebradyhicks.com, and that's where our episodes are now. In the next 2 weeks, I will have an answer, one or the other, of where we are going to be permanently housed. But again, thanks to VOC Nation Radio Network at thebradyhicks.com. Or if you'd like to stick to the video, you're watching this right now. God, I hope you are, because you're already there at that website, youtube.com/danlaw83. I also Twitch now, so that's the thing to do. So I'm going to give that a shot. Yeah, that's it. We're signing off for Craig Ligons. I am the above average comedian. See you later.